sensed in my heart 2 days ago, I was, and I'm not getting super spiritual here, I'm just going to be me, right? But I heard the Lord say something to me in my heart, and I said, okay, God, I'll preach that. And he said, that's not to preach, that's to incubate. You leave that in there. Don't you talk about this yet. I said, all right. And then he began to deal with my heart, and I said, Lord, I want to deliver whatever you want. How many of you know the word's important? Shout yes. How many of you know the book of Luke says that his kingdom has come and dwells within us? Everybody say his kingdom has come. Everybody say his will. This word that I'm getting ready to speak this morning might not be for everybody. It might not be for you now, but I guarantee you that if you are walking with God, you have been to the place that we're going to talk about. If you haven't been there, there will be times that you will see some similarities in what is being presented to you today. The word that I feel like the Lord spoke to no, I don't feel like it. The word that the Lord told me to speak. Everybody will have something in common with it. Past, present, future. Comes out of 2 Samuel chapter 4. But it also gives enlightenment of where we're going in this house. So this morning, worship team, I want you to just play this through one more time. You can find your places, be seated if you would please. 2 Samuel chapter 4. Everybody say the old book. Everybody say types and shadows. 2 Samuel 4:4. The old timers used to say, when you get there, shout yes. Second Samuel chapter 4, verse 4. And it says this, it says Jonathan, everybody say Jonathan. Saul, King Saul's son, had a son who was a cripple in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news came out of Jezreel of the deaths of King Saul and Jonathan. And the boy's nurse took him up and fled, and in her haste, he fell out of her arms and became lame in both feet. His name was Mephibosheth. In life, things will happen to you that you don't have any control over. In life, things will happen that you will not have any control over. Now watch. What do you do when it's an accident? But it has a negative effect on you. It wasn't planned out, but it happened this way, that King Saul and Jonathan, who we know had a covenant with David, David had a covenant with Jonathan. I teach that a little different than most people, and that's okay. How many of you hear what I'm saying? But everybody say a covenant was there. Watch this. Jonathan had a son, and his name was Mephibosheth. Boy, what a name. What was Jonathan thinking? I tell you what he was thinking. If you ever hear it, you'll never forget it. Mephibosheth. Everybody say it with me. Say Mephibosheth. I just like the way it falls off my lips. Mephibosheth. Now watch. 5 years old, King Saul and Jonathan had been killed. The babysitter, or Mephibosheth's nurse, picked him up in haste, right? Because the bloodline in the kingdom is getting ready to change. Are you listening to what I'm saying? You need to listen, as the old farm boys I used to run around with said this, Barry, they said this, you got to listen hard. Listen. The bloodline's getting ready to change, so the nurse of Mephibosheth, his babysitter, whisks him up off of his feet. I'm saying this is just added by Tim. Running down the step, he falls out of her arms. He becomes lame in both feet. It's not her fault. It was an accident. She was doing everything within her power to save this 5-year-old baby boy. Because in the kingdom, when kings changed, they got rid of the bloodline. Because they didn't want any competition from previous bloodlines. Stay with me. So now watch this. So it was a legitimate accident. Everybody say legitimate accident. Jonathan and his son Mephibosheth, they are destined for the throne over Israel. But this unplanned situation happened. And when you really begin to study it out, attitudes got bad. Resentment set in, jealousy set in. All this stuff was going on in the kingdom. Saul had put a bounty out on David's head. I mean, it was just not good. The talk. Seeds being planted that people knew what they were saying when they were saying it to manipulate the mind of individuals within the kingdom. And all of a sudden there's a disturbance in the kingdom. And in haste she swooped him up off of his feet, and he fell out of her arms and became crippled in both of his feet. Everybody say Mephibosheth. A young man that was destined for the throne. Now watch this. He was in a royal bloodline. Turn of events, the unexpected happened. People were getting blindsided. Things began to change, and it wasn't according to how it was supposed to be. King Saul and his son Jonathan were both killed. Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, was 5 years old. He took a hard fall, became lame in both of his feet. Listen, the young man lost the ability to walk, listen now, correctly. Are you listening to what I'm saying? To walk correctly. We need to understand why the babysitter was in such a hurry. She was frantic. I believe she was frantic because David was to become king over Israel. When the new king took over the kingdom in that day, the bloodline of the old king was eliminated so that there would be no competition or uprising from the family of the previous rulers. Because, see, we're looking in the Old Testament, the old book, but it's a type and shadow of pitfalls not to fall into today. The nurse was frantic to save the life of Mephibosheth, but in saving his life, he fell and was crippled in both feet. Now, I want us to go to 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 through 5. It says this, now David is king. Everybody say David is king. But there's something about this man David that is something else. David is king. And David said this, is there still anyone left of the house of Saul to whom I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake? How many of you see that? Say yes. And of the house of Saul there was a servant whose name was Ziba. When they had called him to David, he said to him, are you Ziba? He answered and said, I, your servant am he. The king said, is there still not someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show? Understand, Saul was trying to kill David because he was jealous and put a bounty on his head. There was an uprising between Saul and David. You got to understand, David was Saul's armor bearer. Listen now, watch this. The king said, is there still not someone of the house of Saul? Sounds like David had settled his heart. Sounds like there wasn't any resentment, wasn't any strife. How many of you hear what I'm saying? And you might say, well, that's easy. Saul's dead. I don't know if you know this or not. I'm sure that you do because you're all mature men and women. Even when things die, it leaves a memory. There's a residual. Is there still not someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show, listen to what he says, to whom I may show the unfailing, unsought, unlimited mercy of God? Look at this. Is there someone that I may show the unfailing, everybody say unfailing mercy of God? Listen to this, unsought mercy of God, unlimited mercy of God. And Ziba replied, Jonathan. Listen, he said Jonathan. Oh, now it's Jonathan's in the picture. And David says, the one I had covenant with. Jonathan. He said, there is one. Jonathan has yet a son who is lame in his feet. And the king said, where is he? Ziba replied, he is in the house of Micah, son of Amiel, listen, everybody say, Lodebar. Come on, talk to me. Everybody say Lodebar. Are you here this morning? Everybody say Lodebar. Because, listen, Lodebar is a place where Mephibosheth lived physically, but Lodebar can also be a place where you live mentally, spiritually, emotionally, it's a place you can go there and listen, he was 5 years old. He didn't know. I'm sure that nurse said, we're just making a move. Tried to calm everything down. How many of you hear what I'm saying? Watch this. Is there not still someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show mercy, the mercy of God? Jonathan has yet a son who is lame in his feet. And the king said, where is he? And he said, he is in Lodebar. There's not a time that Richard and Vivian Allen's, there is not a time that I don't see you, that I think of Lodebar. Because you know what it is to live there. When King David sent, then King David, verse 5, then King David sent and brought Mephibosheth from the house of Micah at Lodebar. And Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, now watch this, Mephibosheth, of course, I'm just saying this just for the benefit of saying it and bringing it to more, King Saul's grandson, destined for the throne. Played in the palace courtyards, ran down the aisles of the palace. Mephibosheth. As close as David and Jonathan were to each other, don't you think that David had held Mephibosheth in his arms? As close as they were, don't you think that David possibly, at times came to the birthday party? Because they were close. Listen now. Watch. Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David. And Mephibosheth fell on his face and did reverence the king. And listen to this. I love the way that this is quoted and said, David said, Mephibosheth. Like he knew. Mephibosheth. Now watch. And he answered, And Mephibosheth said, behold your servant. I wonder how it felt to Mephibosheth after, and now he's 20, 25 years old. 15, 20 years later, he comes back into the palace. Things started to seem very, very familiar. Now watch. David said to him, don't fear. Everybody say, no fear. I want you to turn to somebody right now and say, no fear. Say, no fear in the kingdom. No fear. Watch. David immediately addressed the fear in Mephibosheth because no doubt he's thinking, okay, they found me. I've been hiding at Lodibar. I've been told by my nurse how everything went down. I'm hiding out. And immediately David looked at him and said, stop fearing. Now watch this. For I will surely show you kindness. Now listen to this. For Jonathan, your father's sake, and I will restore to you all the land of King Saul, your grandfather, and you shall eat at my table always. And Mephibosheth the cripple bowed himself and said, what is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I am? Then the king called to Ziba. Now listen at this. David said it to Mephibosheth, but how many of you know it's one thing to say something to somebody and then put it into action? And there's a lot of that in the kingdom today. Watch. Then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson Mephibosheth, all that belonged to Saul and all to his house. And you shall till the land for him, you, your sons, and your servants, and you shall bring in the produce, the fruit of your master's grandson, and give it to him, that he may have food to eat. Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, listen now, shall eat always, David said, at my table. Breakfast, dinner, and supper, he's going to be seated at my table. He's not just saying this to Mephibosheth, he's saying this to Ziba and telling him to follow the order. I want all the land of his grandfather Saul to be given to him. I want all of your servants, all 25 of them, you and your sons and daughters. I want you to till the ground, and I want you to harvest it, and I want you to bring him in the fruit of the harvest. Everybody say plenty. King David said, he shall always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do according to all that my lord the king commands. So now watch this. So Mephibosheth ate at King David's table as one of King David's sons, reinstated back to be an heir to the throne, and he wasn't even in the bloodline. David saw past the old. David, I'm going to show you in a moment where God opened up the kingdom realm to David and showed him the old and the new. Are you listening to what I'm saying? Listen, something is happening in the atmosphere of what we call the church. Something's happening. Everybody turn to your neighbor and say, it's good, but there's some things that we are not going to disengage from. If you study this, David did not disengage from the order and the standard that God had set. Matter of fact, if you look at the Old Testament, in the Old Testament when truth was revealed, blood flowed. In the New Testament, when truth is revealed, mercy is applied. Stay with me. Watch now. If you're with me so far, shout yes. How many of you want to be a good soldier in the army of the Lord? Lift your hand and shout yes. Man, I want to be obedient. Now watch. According to 1 Samuel 20, David was honoring the covenant between himself and Jonathan. Everybody say honoring the covenant. King David said, "Is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Jonathan had a son, Mephibosheth. He's lame in both feet because of an accident. And we see that he has been living, Mephibosheth has been living in a place called Lodebar. He lived in a place called Lodebar. Mephibosheth lived in Lodebar physically. Today, many live in Lodebar mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, financially. The meaning of Lodebar when you separate the prefix. How many of you ready to go there? Say yes. Lo, everybody say lo. In the Hebrew means not, no, non. It means nah. My dad was the worst in the world. He would never say no. You'd say, "Dad, you going to go to the store today?" And he'd go, "Nah." Everybody do that with me. Come on, it's great English. Everybody go, "Nah, nah, 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 nah." Lo meaning not, no, non. It means nah, or watch this, never. Never. And when you define Debar, sounds like a rock and roll group, soul group. It's just a joke, ha ha ha. And when you define Debar, it means to speak, to say, to talk, to tell, to utter, to get into conversation. When you put this together, it means I have nothing to speak of, nothing to talk about, nothing to say, no words, no conversation. Lodebar. Lodebar is not at all a desirable place to live. But Mephibosheth it wasn't his choice. There was an accident. There was an accident because somebody got jealous. There was an accident because somebody got offended. There was an accident because somebody held resentment. It wasn't Mephibosheth's fault. Honestly, it was a legitimate accident. But he ends up in a place called Lodebar. Lodebar is not a desirable place to live. You wouldn't even want to visit there. Matter of fact, people don't live in Lodebar because it's their choice. Understand, they don't live there because they've committed some great sin or because they've done something wrong. Lodebar is a place you live when life doesn't work out the way you planned. Stay with me. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you with me? Lift your hand real high. When it don't work out the way you planned. When you have feelings you thought you'd never have. Listen. Lodebar is a place you live when life doesn't work out the way you plan. When life doesn't look like you thought it would. When expectation doesn't meet your dream. When life takes a sudden turn and because of other people's choices, decisions, actions, you're injured, you're damaged, you're hurt. Or because of a legitimate accident. Mephibosheth was living in Lodebar because of a legitimate accident. Listen, fighting now with esteem problems, anger problems, pride problems, rebellious problems, jealousy problems, fighting now with rejection. Watch. If you're still with me, say yes. I never will forget one time, my family, we've kind of made a joke out of it. My brother-in-law brought over a swing set, and it wasn't put together, and we had it out in the back, and the weeds had kind of grew up around it. I knew where it was at. I got in a hurry one day and I ran over that swing set and destroyed it in my hay truck. I never will forget Josh come running out there. Remember this, Jay? Come running out there and he goes, "You did that on purpose." I said, "No, I didn't." Kathy said, "Tim Sumner." And I said, "What?" And she said, "You ran over that swing set on purpose." I said, "No, I didn't. I didn't do it on purpose." To this day, they believe that I did it on purpose. But look at me. I didn't. But they believe. Have you ever tried to tell somebody the truth and they wouldn't believe it and you're really telling the truth? God. Makes you want to pull your hair out. If you've already pulled your hair out, it makes you want to bite your fingernails. If you've already pulled your hair out and bit your fingernails, it makes you want to take nerve pills. We won't talk about that. I'm telling the truth and nobody believes me. Stay with me. So, what's the use of talking? I'm telling my true feelings. What's the use of talking? I'm saying what is true, but what's the use of going through it all again? How many of you with me? Lift your hand and say yes. How many of you can say I relate? Yeah, stay with me now. Watch. Life takes a sudden turn, and because of other people's choices, decisions, actions, you're injured, you're damaged, you're hurting. I want to ask you a question. I know in the church world we talk a lot about brokenness. There is a brokenness that God adds to our lives that really brings us into a place of humility. But how many of you have ever been broken by things, situations, and circumstances? God, man, it stinks. At one time or another, every one of us has, and that brokenness, and with that sometimes there comes anger. I want the type of brokenness in me that doesn't give in to anger, but it allows humility. Everybody shout humility. Say it again, say humility. Humility. So I hear this, and I've seen this, and I felt this. You were raised all your life without a father, and you feel the effects. You were raised most of your life with a father, but he was abusive, and you feel the effects. Mom and Daddy got a divorce, and it wasn't your fault, but you feel the shame, you feel the effects. Daddy found another woman and married her. Mama found another man and married him. They're all happy. And we've been told, don't talk about it. Everybody say Lodabar. I never will forget, I was at Grandma Mancini's in Las Vegas. We were having dinner. We were sitting there talking at a restaurant. It was so cool. The Italian way of doing things is so stinking cool. She was sitting there at the table in this restaurant, and there was nothing served on that table except she tasted it first. That's the truth. And I was like, dude, this is cool. Have you ever been around someone that you know that people saw them when you walked in as them being prestigious and important, and it kind of did something within you? I'm not saying anything bad. I'm not saying there's something bad. It's just go, hey, man, there's some weight here, you know? I never will forget how that went down. I started talking with my brothers around that table. I started talking with my brothers. I'm talking bloodline. I started talking with my brothers. I'd been adopted into the family. That's what she told me, so I believed her. And we started talking about a certain thing, and she looked at us and she went, we don't talk about that. Buddy, I just turned back down to my plate and started eating my spaghetti. How many of you know there are some things we don't need to talk about? But then there are some things that need to be entered to in a mature conversation. I mean, are we there yet? Stay with me. If you're still with me, shout yes. Everybody else is happy, but you know what? I'm sad. I feel the pain, I feel the loss, I feel the damage, I feel the hurt, I feel the insecurity, I feel the resentment. I didn't make this choice. I didn't make this decision. I didn't do all this stuff. It wasn't Mephibosheth's fault that daddy died. Nurse, some people say dropped him. I'm going to say it like this. It wasn't Mephibosheth's fault that daddy died. He fell out of the nurse's arms. The doctor couldn't fix him, and he ends up in Lodebar. It was not Mephibosheth's fault. Can we look into our lives and see that there are some things that we have got the residual from that is not our faults? Watch now, I'm just setting the foundation. Understand there are many things that is not your fault, but the decisions, choices, actions, accidents affects us all at times. Mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, even financially. No one was there to give you proper guidance. No one was there to provide a good, solid education concerning your life. No one was there to inspire you, to encourage, to inform, and to affirm you. It's not your fault your employer went bankrupt and you've done everything in your power to find another job and you can't. You're losing your house, you lost your car, your manhood's being affected, your womanly stature is being hindered. At times, people are very, very quick to judge or assume that people who are faced with bad situations have had to do something wrong to get there. Not so. Are you listening to what I'm saying this morning? Somebody asked, come up to you and said, hey, how you doing? And you start telling them about how you're really doing. They are hearing you talk but not listening to what you say, and you get it. They are concerned about you. They really are concerned about you, but they don't want to get involved with how you're feeling or with what you're going through. But honestly, they are concerned. Now, I know this. I've seen it. They really are concerned, but they don't want to get involved. How many times have we been going down the road in our travels? I can name 3 times right now. One time we stopped at this, right before we got home. We were on the road, we were traveling, and we stopped at the Vallejo. All of a sudden, 2 girls come out the doors. They're pulling hair and scratching and biting. Kathy jumps out of the car, goes there and said, now you girls act like women. God. She got, didn't she? She got one here and got one here. Now you go, you go and I'm thinking, I'm just putting gas in the truck. I'm not messing. Look at me. I ain't getting involved. The tall blonde got involved. But I ain't getting involved. I mean, they got hair. They were pulling out each other's hair. Kathy goes over there. She goes, now you need to act like young ladies. Broke that thing up. One went one way, one went the other. When the cops got there, everything was cool. I am not a first responder. What about Kathy and Josh? Either you guys were just married or just got married. And I think you just got married. And we call them Sumner Adventures. Okay, not trying to put the spotlight on us. I'm just using this for an example. How many of you with me? Because I don't like that. But it makes sense here. So we have got a church building here, and we're going and blowing, and God's doing great things. So we heard about another piece of property that became available. And so it wasn't in the best side of town. So Chelsea and Josh is sitting in the back with Beth, and me and Kat's up front, and we're cruising along there, and we go around the property and look, and all of a sudden we see this one guy chasing another guy with a knife. And he's yelling at him. And Kathy said, stop the car. Josh said, I'm calling 911. And Chelsea melts in the back seat. She said, oh my God, this sucks. She goes, and she was laying in the seat. She goes, Tim, go. And I said, I ain't going. Kathy's getting out of the car. Josh is calling 911. We're taking care of this thing. And Chelsea's going, oh, God, I've heard about these Sumner Adventures. What about the other time? Broke up the gang fight. What about that? We was in Bakersfield, living out of Carl and Jennifer's apartment while they were overseas. We looked downstairs, right? And they're getting ready to go to war, and I'm thinking, call the cops. I ain't getting involved in this. What's going on down there? Goes out the door, goes down there. This guy's got a butcher knife. He has a butcher knife. Kathy said, what are you doing with that? And if you don't put that up, I'm calling your mother. I stayed upstairs. Broke that thing up. The kid looked at her like, I don't have no mama. He did. Did he? I remember. I mean, I was watching, but I wasn't getting involved. That's what 911's for. What if everybody thought that way? I'm praying that this church becomes a first responder. And there's some things that I have to change. And I'm willing. Yeah, I know. You call me and I'll call you back. You text me and I'll text you back. If you need me at the hospital, I'll be there. There's some things I'm not going to get involved in until I'm invited. How many of you heard what I just said? Because I'm a private pastor. Just stay with me. That's how we roll. But stay with me just a moment. Kind of took a sidebar there because I wanted you to laugh a little bit because we're getting ready to get into something. At times people are very quick to judge or assume that people who are faced with bad situations have had to do something wrong to get there. Not so. There are such things as legitimate mistakes. So we don't talk about it. Nothing to talk about, no words, don't communicate about it. Came to a place within ourselves, there's nothing to say. I'll just talk to God. And that's important. It's also important to have counselors. You and I, at times, we don't know why people respond or react the way they do. Saved, born again a second time, unsaved, once born. They might have been or are being abused. You never know. They might be fighting a secret battle, a hidden lie. They might be fighting with pride, trying to be humble. Might be fighting with a hidden addiction, prescription drugs. Whatever the situation, a hidden battle that keeps them in inner turmoil. Many won't talk about it. There's nothing to talk about. Many won't talk because of the shame. How many, listen to me now. How many of you with me say yes? Many won't talk about it because of the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment. You don't know what they went through that developed that low self-esteem. Listen to me. You don't know what they went through that developed that low self-esteem, those insecurities, the depression, the anxiety, that not enough attitude. You don't know what they went through. I had a guy tell me not long ago, looked at me and he said, you know, I want to talk to you. And I said, why is that? He said, I'm tired of people looking at me and saying, just get over it. He said, you're not going to tell me that. And I said, you're right. I'm going to tell you, let's walk through it. Because you're 50 years old and it happened when you were 20 and you ain't over it yet. They said, I'm tired of people saying, just get over it. I was rejected. I was denied. And they look at you and they say, I'm a grown man, I'm a grown woman, and I'm still not over it. Mephibosheth is now a grown man, an adult. He has a wife and he has a son. The son's name is Micah. Mephibosheth has lived in Lodabar all these years. He's now between the ages of 20 and 25 years old, as far as I could find out. A grown man. He used to live in the palace, play in the palace courtyards, run up and down the hallways of the palace. He lived in the mansion. He sat at the king's table. He ate from the king's food. This young man was destined for the throne, and there was an accident. 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 5. How many of you still with me? Say yes. Because I think we all have something in common. David sent for Mephibosheth. Verse 6 of 2 Kings 9. King David gave an invitation to Mephibosheth, and basically what he's saying, it's time to come out of Lodabar. Let's talk about it. Mephibosheth told David, I'm a cripple, I'm like a dog. David was saying, bring your insecurities, bring your low self-esteem, bring your anger, bring your arrogancy, bring your know-it-all out, bring those things that have crippled you and you've lived with for years. The king was giving Mephibosheth an invitation, come with all your baggage, with all your sarcasm, come. I don't know what you've heard, but I'm going to tell you the truth. It's awful quiet in the potter's house. David said, this is what I'm going to do for you, Mephibosheth. I'm giving you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. And I can imagine, he's down on his knees, right? I don't know how he walked in there, but he didn't walk right. I feel like he walked, but he didn't walk right. Maybe like this. He didn't walk like this because there was an accident. It had an effect on the way he walked. But it didn't keep him from receiving an invitation back to the kingdom. You know my soapbox here. My soapbox is the tongue. How many of you know that? So yeah. If there are any among you that cannot control your tongue, you are filled with self-deception, and all of your spiritual activity is in vain. It's what it says. What does the word vain mean? Useless, worthless, unable to reproduce life, because the tongue is the reproductive organ of the church. James 1:26. How many of you hear the potter's wheel turning this morning? Lift your hand. It's okay. There ain't nobody in trouble. We're getting in truth. And when truth is revealed, there ain't going to be no bloodshed. When truth is revealed in this house, mercy is going to be applied. Stay with me now. He looked at Mephibosheth and he said, you will always have a place at my table, the king's table. Mephibosheth bowed himself. What is your servant that you should look upon such a dog as I? Mephibosheth looked at King David and said, sir, I'm no better than a dead dog, just a waste of time. I used to be valuable, was destined for the throne, I've told. I'm no longer important. Why should you be so good to me? Why should you be so good to me? Why are you being good to me? I've got a wife. I've got a child. I was living in Lodabar. There's not a lot of conversation going on around there. Verse 9, then King David called to Ziba and Saul's servant, I have given your master's grandson Mephibosheth all that belongs to King Saul and all his house. And you shall till the land for him, you, your sons, and your servants, and you shall bring in the fruit, the harvest of that land. You, your master's grandson, Mephibosheth, shall eat bread always at my table. Then Ziba said to King David, your servant will do according to all the king's commands. So Mephibosheth ate at the king's table as one of his sons. Everybody say adopted in. Come on, talk to me now. Say adopted in. Adopted in. How did he get adopted in? Through covenant. Not throwing this old book away. It's a type and shadow. I've been a Mephibosheth. I've lived in Lodebar. But I had a covenant. My mama had a covenant. My daddy had a covenant. They had a covenant with God. God had a covenant with them. Listen. Have you ever prayed for somebody to come and deliver you out of Lodebar? Listen. I said, this is what I say this house needs to do. We need to start having a mercy feast here. We need to have a mercy feast, a mercy fest like never before, God's mercy. And I think we need to go to Lodebar, and I think we need to make Lodebar a ghost town. Let's close that place up. Listen. Why was King David so good to Mephibosheth? I'll tell you why. Because of a covenant that he had with his father, Jonathan. A covenant between David and Jonathan. A covenant between Jesus and the Father. Listen, well, I wonder if the covenant that you have with God is going to help somebody. My sons, my daughters, my nephews, my nieces, aunts, and uncles. How many of you hear what I'm saying? Shout yes. David brought Mephibosheth out of Lodebar and established him into the kingdom. Brought him to Jerusalem. Listen what he did. He brought him to Jerusalem. Okay, let's look at Jerusalem now and let's bring the two together. You know, the Bible talks about Jerusalem being the mother of all, where everything gets its start. I ain't even going to get into that right now. That's a deep subject. I told the Lord just a few days ago, I said, Lord, that's a deep subject. And then I continued to talk to myself, and sooner or later this oil field mentality come out with me, because I used to say stuff like, that's a deep subject for such a shallow mind. And that's what I was thinking about myself. Well, that's a deep subject for such stuff. But God began to speak to me about that. But stay with me now. How many of you still with me? Say yes. David brought Mephibosheth out of Lodebar and established him into the kingdom, brought him to Jerusalem. Jerusalem. What does Jerusalem mean? The mother, it means this, flowing water. Flowing water. Stay with me now. He brought him to Jerusalem. 2 Samuel chapter 9 verse 13 says, so Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table as one of his sons. Jerusalem means the place of flowing water, where water flows. Everybody say flowing water. Jerusalem also means to point out. Okay, going to have a discussion now. It means to point out, it means to teach, it means to instruct, it means to direct, it means to inform. Flowing water. How many of you get it? Say yes. Now watch this. Mercy was bestowed upon Mephibosheth's life when he came back into the kingdom. I want you to see this now, and I want you to hear this. He came to the place of flowing water where mercy was bestowed upon Mephibosheth. He was established in a palace of mercy. He sat at a table of mercy. He ate from a plate of mercy. He drank from a cup of mercy. He lived in a land of mercy. He received the harvest that comes from mercy. A place of flowing water. Then if you go over into the new covenant, We're going to bring this thing together now. How many of you still with me? Shout yes. I want you to look at John chapter 5, I believe it is. Look at this. John 5. Yeah. Later on, there was a Jewish festival or feast for which Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. And there is in Jerusalem, this is the only place you will find this word. And there was there in Jerusalem in the Bible. And there is there in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, this pool in the Hebrew called Bethesda, having 5 porches. And in these 5 porches there was a great multitude, a great number of sick folk. Now watch this. Some blind. They couldn't help it, they were blind. Some crippled. They couldn't help it because they were crippled. Some paralyzed. They were shriveled up. And they were waiting. All of these things were not something that I guarantee, a sickness, a disease. Watch. They would wait for an angel of the Lord who would come down at an appointed season and would stir the waters, and the first one into the pool got healed. Now stay with me. When Mephibosheth came out of Lodebar, David brought him to Jerusalem. Jerusalem simply means a place of flowing water, a place where we are taught, a place where we are educated, a place where we are instructed, a place where we are informed about the truth. Now watch this. You know what Bethesda means? That is in Jerusalem, established in Jerusalem. It means when you come into Jerusalem, you come into a place of flowing water. But there is a place in Jerusalem. I always thought Bethesda was a city. Bethesda was a place. It was like a house, and it was called the House of Mercy in Jerusalem. When David brought Mephibosheth back into Jerusalem, he brought him into flowing water where he could be instructed about the truth. He was adopted as a son because of a covenant. Now watch this. But he was lavished in mercy. Nobody going to take you out of his hand. You have to forfeit it, sis. Listen. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, as Kathy and I traveled over the last 4 or 5 weeks, we were on vacation for about 2.5, 3 weeks, set back with this toe. They had to cancel, then you have to quarantine. I told somebody, I said, it's easier to get into jail than it is the hospital. But I had to quarantine for this foot. And I got released Friday. I'm good to go. They said no pain. I said no. They said no swelling. And I said very little. They said, did you wear the boot? And I said, I wore it. She said, it looks good. You're good to go. I said, thank you. I really appreciate it. She said, if you need anything, arched her eyebrow and said, call me. I said, okay. Welcome to mercy. I want to be mature enough to receive it, and I want to be mature enough to give it. When mercy comes, it will have an effect on your resentment. When mercy comes, it will have an effect on your offense. When mercy comes, it will have an effect on how you talk and how you speak and how you present yourself and how you present your family and how you present your God when mercy comes. In the Old Testament, when truth was revealed, blood flowed. I got one. I had several examples, but I can only give one because I feel like I'm going too long. Like the other day, the Lord spoke to me and He said, if I tell you just to preach for 35 minutes, will you do it? I never answered Him. You remember when Jericho was conquered by the Israelites? How many remember that? This is the best one. Everybody knows. Jericho was conquered by the Israelites, and they were giving a standard. They were given an order: when we go in and we overtake Jericho, when the walls fall down flat, do not partake of anything of what is there. It all goes into the Lord's treasury. How many remember that? Say yes. But there was a man by the name of Achan. He took 20 shekels of silver, a bar of gold, and a beautiful Babylonian garment, and he hid it in his tent. He went against God, what God said. He sinned. Everybody say sinned. Listen, there are people that sin in the Old Testament. There are people that sin in the New Testament. There is such a thing as repentance even after salvation. How many of you listen to what I'm telling you? Now stay with me. Now watch this. And the Bible says that Achan partook of the spoil and hid it in his tent. And then all of a sudden, Joshua, they had a great victory. They had a great victory, man, over Jericho. I mean, it was great. I mean, people were excited. They were shouting. They were dancing. They were loving life. There was a great victory established. And all of a sudden, Joshua sent people to Ai to do battle at Ai. And when they went to Ai, they got their hind ends handed to them. They got defeated. And all of a sudden, Joshua went down on his face and began to cry out to God. How many of you hear what I'm saying? God come up there and said, "What are you doing down there crying? The children of Israel have sinned." And he said, God began to reveal it to him. He said, the sin is in Achan. You need to call Achan and all of his sons and all of his daughters and all of his household. Everybody say Old Testament. Said you need to call them all together. Went to the tent. They found everything that they had hid in the tent. And this is what the Bible says. Gathered them all together. God gathered all their livestock, gathered everything, and slew them all. Truth was revealed and blood flowed. But in the New Testament, when truth is revealed, mercy is applied. Now let me show you something, and I'm closing. David saw this. I love Paul the Apostle and his example because he was Saul of Tarsus. How many of you know he killed Christians? Lift your hand. How many of you know he tortured Christians, thought he was doing God a favor? He was messed up, right? Okay, watch this. This is what he said after he was struck down by a light that was bright as the noonday sun, and a voice spoke and said, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Now watch this. His life was transformed, was changed. And he became, instead of Saul of Tarsus, Paul the Apostle. He wrote over half of the New Testament by revelation. I love what he says in 1 Timothy verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 16. Paul says, "But I have obtained mercy for this reason, that in me, as the chief of sinners, Jesus Christ might show forth and display all his perfect long-suffering and patience for an example to encourage those who would thereafter believe on him for gaining of eternal life." Paul said he used me as an example of his mercy and patience. Stay with me. If you walked in here feeling like a failure, you're going to walk out of here not feeling like a failure or a victim. You're going to walk out of here knowing you're a son because his mercy endureth forever. Listen. But I love this. David saw this. He looked into the future. That's the only way I know to say it because this blows me away, man. When I saw this, I think I screamed. I think I did. When I saw this, I thought, man, God, you were showing David, you gave him a glimpse into the dimension of the kingdom and what was going to happen in the future. Listen to what he says. Watch this. Psalm 85, verse 4. David says, "Restore us, O God of our salvation, and cause your anger towards us to cease." Listen, forever. Will you be angry with us forever, O God? Will you prolong your anger and disfavor and spread it out to all generations? Will you not revive us again, O Lord, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your mercy, O Lord, and grant us your salvation. David says, I will listen with expectancy to what God the Lord will say, for he will speak peace to his people, to his saints, those who are in right standing with him, listen what he says, but let them not turn again to self-confident folly. Surely his salvation is near to those who reverently and worshipfully fear him, and is ready to be appropriated, that the manifest presence of God, his glory, may tabernacle and abide in our land. Do you hear what it's saying there? Okay, now watch this. He goes on to say, mercy and truth have come together. Never before. David, king of the Old Testament, Jerusalem. How many of you hear one thing? He said, mercy and truth have met and come together. No longer will a man be slain for his sin, but when truth is revealed, an opportunity is offered that mercy can be applied. In the Old Testament, when truth was revealed, blood was shed. In the New Testament, when truth is revealed, mercy is applied. Now, listen, this is the thing. Can we give the mercy we have received? Teacher? Truth bearer? For weeks? Because you get something in your head and you know it's from God and you stick with it. You're not easy to be swayed and you're not easy to give it up. You say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I hear you. I see you talking to yourself and you say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to turn out like that. I don't want to say that. I don't want to think like that. I hear you. If I'm wrong, you tell me you're wrong because it's in you to tell me I'm wrong. That's why I'm saying it to you, because for 2 weeks he brought you to me. And you know what he said? He said, she's a daughter. You hear me? She's a daughter. I said, God, she's young. He said, she's a daughter. She's more mature in spiritual things than you would know. He's going to raise them up fast around here. You hear what I'm telling you? He's going to raise them up fast. I'm telling you, out of the spiritual anointing of this house is coming apostles and prophets and pastors and teachers and evangelists for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry. You hear what I'm saying? For the work of the ministry, not for the work of self-indulgence. There's going to be some changes. It's going to be cool. Renee, get your boots up. Strap them up, because here we go. I expect to hear you holler louder and louder every Sunday. Don't you ever stop that. You hear that? It might not be welcome in some churches, but it's welcomed here because I know where you come from. I know what you've been through. I know what, hey, you know what I'm saying? Woo! You need to get out in the aisle and dance a little more. I sit here and I look over this congregation. Matter of fact, let me get this note. I told Steph, Steph, write down the miracles. Send them to me. She didn't write them down. She sent them to Melissa Berry, negative lupus results. Michelle's oncologist declares her cancer-free. One young lady, 3 biopsies, all negative. Jason Kent, no surgery. Janelle, unable to conceive, now is with child. Family realizes it is a complete miracle. Larry, released from hospital, said he had a stroke, but the doctor said there's no sign of a stroke. Indy's eye is cancer-free. Dan Kimball's healing, the doctor said, yeah, well, whatever. The doctor said that from his shoulder surgery that he is healing very, very quickly, and the doctors are amazed. No, look at me. This is just a few. Can we handle miracles in this house? Oh, wait. Oh, stay with me. Because, okay, I'm the shepherd, right? And I'm not lording over anybody. I want us to be able to handle them and not get full of pride. So if I want to tell you, the greatest weapon against pride is mercy, because mercy lets me know that I can't do it. I can't do it. And it will tell me, you can't do this. Can we come together? Can we solidify? Can we not become a city? How many of you hear what I'm saying? A city that on the inside of that city, there is a place called Bethesda. There is a place of flowing water and mercy. Somebody said, are you tired? No. But I cannot go on a maintenance program. I can't. I cannot just stay in one place and not grow. I can't. I want us to be a place that we are spiritually mature enough to handle miracles. And if somebody said, you prayed and the miracle happened, we say, thank you, Jesus. And mean it. So today, while every head's bowed and every eye's closed, if you would, please. I'm not going to tarry a real long time, but I'm just going to say this. If you're here right now and you feel like you are in Lodabar, I want you to stand to your feet. Keep standing. Yeah, you're amongst family. This is a house of mercy. We're becoming a house of mercy. Yeah, just keep standing. Calling you out of Lodabar this morning. You might carry some of the hurt and some of the pain, some of the resentment, some of the things that come with accidents, some of the things that come with the decisions that people make. You might be carrying some of that. I want you to keep standing. Yeah, keep standing. He's calling us out of Lodabar. Let's make Lodabar a ghost town. Let's populate the kingdom. Let's bring people into Jerusalem, the mother of all. Let's bring them to a place of mercy, of flowing water where they're educated, learned, where they'll talk about certain things and it can be trusted. And I'm not talking about just private conversations. I'm talking about with people. Not just private conversations. Being able to say, you know what, I went through this, and give a testimony. How many of you hear what I'm saying? Say, yeah. Every one of you that are standing to your feet right now, I'd like you to come and stand right here in the front facing me, if you would, please. We're coming out of Lodabar. And I want you to understand something. The process is a wonderful thing. And I know people get tired of hearing about process, but everything is process. That chair didn't just become a chair. That material had to go through a process. That metal had to go through a process. That pulpit didn't just become a pulpit. Hey, just a pulpit. It had to go through a process. There had to be a processing of the wood. It had to be cut. It had to be put in certain places. It had to take form and shape. Everybody say form and shape.